everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I'm out here on the Wisconsin River. I want to do a quick video for you regarding lipless crankbait retrieves. I've been doing this retrieve series for quite some time now. We've probably covered 10 or 15 different tactics, and I continue to get requests from you guys, and I get really good feedback on the retrieve videos, so I want to continue with this. One of the requests that I get frequently is for a lipless crankbait, which is one of my favorite baits to use. You know, I've recently said that if I could only have 5 versatile baits, that I would choose a lipless crankbait over other baits that are kind of in that same category of your swim jigs, your spinner baits, your chatter baits. And the reason for that is I think the lipless crankbait is more versatile in that it works from extremely cold water all the way up to warm water, from current to slack water, dirty water, clear water. It's really one of the most versatile baits out there. And because of that, I want to do a retrieve video for you guys. So we're going to go over my top 3 or 4 retrieves that I like to use. It's one of those baits that does work really well on a straight retrieve. But I'm telling you, if you're only straight retrieving it, you're missing out on a bunch of extra bites, because it is one of the best bites or baits at creating reaction strikes. And in order to create that reaction strike, you got to impart some additional action in your bait. You want to deflect it off things. You want to deflect it off weeds, rip it out of weeds, hit it off logs, bounce it off rocks. It's a really good bait in terms of creating those reaction strikes. And even though it's a double treble hooked bait, it is fairly weedless. You know, it rips through grass really well, and it does deflect off wood and rock really well, at the same time. Now, you are going to get stuck if you're beating the bait up into those objects, but that's part of the game, guys. If you're not getting stuck, you're probably not fishing as tight to cover as you should be. So if you get stuck, don't worry about that. That's no big deal. I've got here, this is the 1/2 ounce Berkley War Pig, one of my favorite lipless baits. I match it up with a custom MHX rod that I build. It's the NMB 873. So it's a 7.3 medium heavy fast action rod. It's one of my favorite all around bait cast rods. It's just extremely versatile for using, you know, lipless baits to swim jigs to spinner baits. It's just a really good rod that I build it on. I've got here an Abu Garcia MGX bait cast reel. This is an 8.0 to 1 ratio reel, so it is a fast one. And the reason I use a fast gear ratio reel is because I want to pick up a lot of slack. You know, if I'm giving it yo-yo retrieves, or I'm deflecting it off rocks, or really burning it through the water, I want to be able to pick up that slack if I do feel a strike. So I like a faster gear ratio reel. Other than that, guys, I throw it on 15-pound 100% fluorocarbon the majority of the time. The only time I might step it up to braided line is if I'm fishing really thick cover, being grass or milfoil, and I'm just continuously ripping it through. This happens, you know, in some places like a Gunnersville or down in Florida, where you might run into some really large fish as well. I do like to have the braid because it helps you rip through the grass. But if I'm just fishing basic grass, I generally prefer fluorocarbon. I feel like I can rip it out of the grass almost as well. And I would rather have a little bit of stretch in the fluorocarbon versus that straight braid, which has no stretch. And because of that, you get a lot of fish that slap at your bait. And if they slap at it, a lot of times it gets skin hooked, and that little bit of stretch allows me to put those fish in the boat better than if I'm using straight braid. But there are times when I do prefer braid. So let's show you some of these retrieves. I'm gonna go back to the drone style, because when I did the drone style retrieves with the hair jig, you guys liked it really well. So I'm gonna go to that. I wanna remind you guys though that if you want a little help breaking down your local lakes, check out the lake breakdown maps that I do for fishthemoment.com. Myself, Johnny Schultz, Randy Blockett, we put together a lot of lake breakdowns where you get 40 waypoints on your local lake. It's just a really good way to get some help breaking down a lake if you're having trouble with it. So check those out, the link's in the description. Let's get to some of these retrieves. All right, so I've got here my Berkley War Pig, one of my favorite lipless crankbaits. It works great on the Wisconsin River here. So I'm fishing a shallow gravel bar. We got current coming from left to right. It's only a few feet deep. It's a great type of structure to fish during the summer months. You get both largemouth and smallmouth will pull up onto these shallow bars like this, but there's no cover. There's nothing that's going to allow me to deflect off of. There's no wood, there's no grass, there's really nothing but gravel. So in this case, I'm going to impart the action myself to try to create that reaction strike. So I throw it out let it hit the bottom, and I'm almost gonna work it as if I were working a jig. So I'm gonna just give it quick wrist pops, let it hit the bottom, wrist pop, let it hit the bottom. So I'm just working it back. It's a yo-yo retrieve, but it's not like a stroke. It's just pretty much a straight yo-yo retrieve. This works great all the way down to like 12 to 15 foot of water. At that point, it gets a little harder to keep your bait on the bottom, but really good retrieve style. You just do it, let it go to the bottom, just keep popping it all the way back to the boat. And that's gonna, you know, allow that bait to really just kind of deflect well, pop off the bottom good, and it just works really well. So that's kind of my standard favorite retrieve. Now, if I'm fishing around grass, you can do that same thing, but you might want to go with a little lighter lipless. So maybe instead of a half, you go with a quarter if you've only got 3 feet of water between the top of the weed and the surface. You don't want too heavy of a lipless to really bury down into it. You want a bait that's just heavy enough to grab the tops of the grass and allow you to rip it out of the grass, but not get so buried in the grass where it's going to create a problem. So that's one of my favorite retrieves. At that point, you know, we've got that down. Then I'm going to go with something that's a little bit more drastic. So this is how I like to fish a lipless. If I'm fishing ledges, say down on the TVA lakes, I like to stroke a lipless. So it's almost the same thing as you do with a jig, but you have to keep in mind if you stroke it too hard, you're gonna end up getting your line tangled on the hooks of the bait quite often. So that's something you wanna be aware of. You know, with a jig, you really wanna snap it. With a lipless, it's more about just kind of going with a full stroke, but a nice steady retrieve that's still gonna be strong enough to create that reaction and that burst off the bottom, but not gonna be such a burst that it's gonna get tangled in its own hooks. So it's just a bigger version of what I was just doing. So you're just gonna go from about 9 o'clock up to about 12 o'clock. You're trying to lift that bait, say 5-6 feet off the bottom. Works really good on triggering those fish that are down on ledges. So it's just an overgrown retrieve based to that first yo-yo retrieve style that I was doing, but something that works really, really well. So those are two distinct separate retrieves. Next up, this is one that works phenomenally well early in the spring, like after ice out or when the water's at its coldest period. A lot of times on warm sunny days like we have right now, only in the earliest part of the year, largemouth will move back into some of those bays that are just, you know, only a few feet deep. They're the bays that are more of that mud bottom. In the summer months, they would end up probably being choked out with lily pads or grass. And what I like to do is drag the lipless, just like you would drag, say, a Carolina rig. I can't tell you how good this works. It's one of those things you got to go out and try to see for yourself, because a lot of times your hooks are actually going to be balled up with some of that bottom black muck. So it's something that you feel like you won't get bit, but they still bite it. So I throw it out and I'm just slow pulling it on the bottom, and I let it just kind of work its way over the bottom. It works so good in the spring. It just doesn't feel like it should. So you're pulling it just fast enough to feel the vibration, but you're never leaving contact with the bottom. So you're working it just like you'd be dragging a football jig or a Carolina rig, something along those same baits. You're just trying to maintain that bottom contact, and you're just dragging it. You keep your rod tip pointed at the ground, you drag it 6-7 feet, you let it stop, and those fish will bite it as soon as it stops. I don't know if they think that it's like a crayfish in the mud or a bluegill moving through the mud. I can't tell you specifically, but it's something that they really do enjoy. So that's my third retrieve. The last is just gonna be more for those schooling fish. And I'm moving out of the frame here. Let's see if I can, there we go. Okay, so the last is gonna be more along the lines of schooling fish, where you have fish that are just on the surface, you know, or suspended. At that point, it's just a burn, stop, go. So you're gonna throw it out, let it fall to the depth that you want it to. Say you're fishing 20 feet of water, the fish are down in 10, you let it fall, count it down a few seconds to that range, and then you're just gonna burn it, kill it. Burn it, kill it. Burn it, kill it. So you're gonna do, you know, 4 or 5 good reel turns as fast as you can, kill it. And then they'll hit it almost every time as soon as you stop it. It's really good on those suspended fish. It's really good on schooling fish during the summer months. And it's also a really good, if you've got floating docks or standing timber on your lake, it's a really good way to fish too, because you can just throw it out there, and that burn, kill, stop and go retrieve is something that will generate them to come up and strike that bait from, you know, 10, 15 feet away. So it really has good drawing power. So you're just gonna burn it, kill it. Burn it, kill it once you get it down to that level. Great retrieve style. But those are gonna be my 4 main ways that I fish a lipless crankbait. I'm not looking at just doing a straight retrieve. Obviously you can get bit doing that. But if you create some additional motion in your bait, you're gonna generate some extra strikes. So it's something you wanna pay attention to. So I've got, you know, a small yo-yo retrieve, a larger yo-yo retrieve, which is gonna be your stroking of the lipless. I've got a dragging style, and then I've got pretty much a stop and go burning retrieve back for those suspended fish. That's how I like to fish a bait like this War Pig. And it generates a lot of strikes year round. This is a bait that you can catch fish from cold water to warm water in any type of situation. So give it a try, guys. If you're not throwing lipless crankbaits, I really think you need to pick yourself up some, because it is a great fish catching tool. Thanks for watching. I'm gonna get back to fishing here, and I'll see you tomorrow for another episode.